Welcome to Eduonix Learning Solutions for our course for GraphQL for beginners. Now we saw how to make schema, how to connect GraphQL to SQL and MongoDB. So different sort of interfaces and databases. We also saw how to write our own resolvers, and along with that schemas. We also saw how we could mock the data. So all those things we saw. Now in this session, what we are going to see is how to set up step by step building a full stack React app with the GraphQL and the Apollo client. So let's begin it. So it has got three parts basically. So now first we'll begin with setting up a simple client. So let's start. So what we require is, so we are going to use create React app in this tutorial. So let's go ahead and install it. So let's say npm install. So what we want is, as I say, create React and app. So now we'll wait for the computer to respond to it. So we'll clone the tutorial repositories from GitHub like we did last time also. So it's mostly empty, but it has some CSS and images in that we may require to use, and it can help you compare your code with the other official solutions. So let's wait for it to get installed. Now package has got installed. So our next step is to clone from GitHub. So let's say like we did last time too. So we say git clone, and you will provide the address https github.com/apollo graphql/graphql tutorial.git, and now hit enter. So there was a mistake. Actually, this has to be, now hit enter and wait. So it says, so cloning into GraphQL fatal, unable to find helper. So we have to https and now do it. So now so these are the mistakes we basically wish to, we need to avoid actually. So now see, so cloning is basically been done. So now let's point to the folder. So cd GraphQL tutorial. Now we create a React app with create React app using the command. So it says create, and you want to put a dash React and then app, and then you have to say client and then hit the enter. So it says it may take certain minutes to create it. So let's wait for the computer to finish with creating the client app. So it takes some time to complete creating the app. It's still in the process. Now since it has got installed, so we got to move to the folder cd client. Or now to check whether it is working fine or not, we got to run the server. So what we do to turn on the servers, we say npm start and now hit the enter. And if all is okay, we'll check the browser. So it says starting the development server. So it is automatically going on to the local host. So this is now what we are able to see. So automatically the environment is being created, and now we are able to see we have reached to the page. So we got to write our first component now. Since we are building an app with Apollo here, we got to change the logo and CSS by copying over logo.svg file and app.css from resources. So let's do it. Now we have to go on to the location where you have stored this GraphQL tutorial. We have to go to the client folder and there is src folder inside it, where you will double click and you will come across the app.js file. Now we have to change this file like we did earlier. We did the modification to our file, so again we'll do that. So we'll change this file like we did for schema, but we will write our code exclusively in a new way. So let's start writing a code in Notepad and then replace this app.js file. So let's begin writing the code and change it. So now say import React, comma, so you'll say component and you say from, and you specify we have to take it from React, obviously, and now you say import logo from, you have to specify the location, so it is logo dot, so svg is the extension of it, and then you have to say import app.css and then you have to close it. And now we have to say channel list and then make it channels list, say equal to, so now it's going to be like what we do to HTML. So now we have to say li, so we say channel 1 and while closing it we usually do it. Now if you are able to understand it, so we are trying to build a messaging app. So it's a channel 2 and you say li, and now we have to say ul and then close it. So semicolon is required to terminate, and now you say class app extends component, so we say render and then say return. So what you are expecting in return, you got to specify that. So say div class name, C needs to be smaller like we do it for casual, and it has to be app, and now second is div, again class name equal to app header, and one more change over here we have to make. This has to be in double quotes rather. Now we are supposed to close it, and now we have to import the image. So we say image src equal to logo, and now once again specify class name that we have called above and say app logo alt equal to logo, and then you are supposed to close it here. Go on to the next line and specify header 2. So take h2 and it has to be welcome to whatever you need to specify. Now I am for time being specify it as Apollo, and I'm closing the header over here using h2, but requires /h2 to do it. And now say /div and close it, and now bring channel list. So say channels list, and then say div and semicolon to terminate the statement. We have got 2 curly brackets to close down, and now it's the last statement that you are supposed to say. It says export default app and use a semicolon to terminate it. And now you must know the location where you have to save it. So I have to store it at the location where I have installed my GraphQL tutorial, and there I have to replace the file that is app.js and then save it. Click on yes, and now let's move on to the next step. Now coming on to the command prompt, since you have saved the file, you have to say create React app and hit the enter and wait for your machine to respond. Here we have to make one more change. So now we have to specify a name which we forgot while we wrote create React app. So you have to write create React app and then write client, again the same name, and then hit the enter. So as you can see over here, the installation and the process of creating an app has just begun. So we got to wait to finish it. So now if you look at it here, you will be able to see a new interface we have got in the browser. So it automatically updates and make it the way we have written it in the new app.js file. So now let's start writing our own GraphQL schema here, and let's do it. And now since we have got a simple app running, it's time to write GraphQL type definitions for it. The schema will specify what object type exists in the app and what fields are they having. So it also specifies the allowed entry points into our API. So let's create the schema and say export type definition and say type. So type is for channel here, so we got to specify that, and we have to take the variable ID and we have to put the exclamation which indicates it is necessary to provide this field. So it is a required field, it cannot be skipped. And next step we are going to take is name, which will be having the type string. Obviously we have done this earlier too. So let's, and now this type specifies the entry points into our API. In this case there is only one channels, so which return a list of channel. So now we got to specify type query. So how query will be, that we got to specify. So let's shape a query. So query will have channels Okay, and it says channel, so means this is the list of channels that will be available. And now let's close it. If you want to make it or prettify it in a GraphQL language, then do it on the next line and close it with the semicolon. So with the schema, we'll be able to write a simple query to fetch the data for our channel list component. So let's now try to wire our component together with the GraphQL query. So now what we are supposed to do is we got to install Apollo client and the helper package that will be required for us. But before that, let's save it with the name schema.js. And now getting back to the command prompt, we got to do certain things. We got to install helper and Apollo client. So let's get it done. So now you gotta say npm I save react dash Apollo. So React Apollo is basically a integration of Apollo client with React that lets you decorate your components with a higher order component called GraphQL. So to get your GraphQL data into the component with a zero effort. So React Apollo also comes with Apollo client, which is the core of Apollo that handles all the data fetching, caching, and certain optimistic updates. So now let's do it. So now with that, let's add few important changes at our app.js and create an instance for Apollo client. So we'll have to get back to the app.js, and now we have again got to make certain changes into it. So now we have to modify our code for app.js. So what we want is import, and now you say Apollo client, comma, we want GQL that you mention, and then say GraphQL, comma, Apollo provider. So let's take it on the next point. So it's look bit readable. We always try to make code readable. Then we have to just close the bracket and say from specify. It is to be taken from, obviously, from a React Apollo. And to avoid any confusion, let's keep it to single quotes. And then coming on to, we have to always be sure that all the import statements are always at top, because that is how the flow should be. And if you change the flow, we get error which says import statement should be at top. So we have to be a bit careful while you write these codes. So and say import logo and then specify from where you intend to bring the logo. So we have a file logo.svg already in our system, or at the location where we already have kept the files. So it says logo.svg, and then close it, terminate the statement with semicolon, and then again say import, and now say dot. Again you have to put backslash here and say app.css, and then close it, put semicolon. And now since we are done with all the imports here, let's talk about app. So now it's a time to declare class app extends component and then say render. We have to render it, and then it's an HTML way of writing the things, so it has to be Apollo provider client equal to client, and then close it, then say div division class name, so obviously, and then say equal to app app, and then we have to say div, that is division class name, and got to specify app header. So and then close it, and now it's about image source. So image source is equal to logo class name equal to app logo, and then L equal to, it's again logo, then backslash. This is the way we usually end the HTML files. So now let's say h2, so it should be welcome to Apollo. That's what we want. Welcome to Apollo h2, and then say slash div, and now we have to say, what is it? Apollo provider. So now we got to close bracket, semicolon, close, close. So now we are making it a pretty readable, and now we have to go a bit down, and as we say, export default app, okay, which is constant client should be new Apollo. Now it's the last part that we got to declare over here. So it says constant channel list, and we got to say data. So what we want, loading, error, channels, and now if we have to specify if loading, so this is a condition whether the data is really available or not, we have to do it. So if loading, so it shall return what? loading. If you want, you can make L capital. So loading. All right. I'll put next condition. If it's an error, then it should return something, right? Then it should return error message that is been received, right? So shall close. Okay, one thing we did it wrong here is we need to, so pretty mistake can be fatal here. So I'm just gotta close it. And the last is return channels dot map chess like equal to got to get channel ID then, and along with that we also require a channel name, so that we are taking all this, close it, and then is what we are closing it now. So, and now we have to just refresh in our command prompt, and once you refresh it, go back to the browser and see what it says. So something like this will be returned to us. But why an error? That's the question. Now we may have wired up all our components correctly, but we have not returned our server yet. So of course there is no data to be fetched or displayed. So if you don't specify a URL for your GraphQL endpoint, Apollo client will assume that it's running on the same origin under /GraphQL. So to change that, we need to create a network interface with a customized URL. So here we require to install two different packages, that is additional packages. So let's get back to the command prompt and get this thing done. Now all you need to do is you have to say npm install -s GraphQL tools Polo test utilities. So we say so utils is to indicate, and then GraphQL, and then hit enter to run it and wait for the computer to respond. So we've got a bit response from it. It has started installing. So let's wait for it to finish up with the installation. Now we have to use this package to create a mock network interface for Apollo client based on the schema we wrote earlier. Now we have to add certain more imports and definition at top of apps.js that we created earlier. So let's do it. So now at the top we got to edit certain things as I explained earlier too, since there we have an import statement. So it has got to be at the top. So again say import, and now what we have to import is make executable schema, and then add mock function to schema, and then at the next line we got to close this curly bracket, and this you want from GraphQL tools, and then there is a next thing that also needs to be import. So we need mock network interface with schema. All right, and that we will want from just now that we installed Apollo test utilities, and now say import type defs, this type definition from schema, and now there has to be nothing that has to be written before import statement for declaring a constant, because as I explained earlier too, otherwise it gives the error. So now let's start writing schema equal to make executable schema type defs, and then close it with semicolon, and now say add mock functions to schema mock network interface equal to mock network interface with schema, and it's the last thing that we'll include here. It says schema, and then close it. Now we got to save this file, and the last one thing that we have to do is we have to pass mock network interface to the constructor of the Apollo client. So what we are supposed to do is client equal to new Apollo client network interface, and then you have to say mock network interface, and there we have to close this, and now we're going to save it and check the screen. So once you run the code, you will be able to see a welcome to Apollo page has appeared and we are getting hello world in the list at the very left end. So this ends the part 1 of combining React with GraphQL. Now let's move ahead with the part 2 of GraphQL plus React. Now moving ahead, in this part we will build an instant messaging app with GraphQL and React. So now let's get started with this. So we are now going to use Express in this tutorial because that is what we are been using since beginning of the GraphQL. So now let's clone the tutorial GitHub repo which will require certain resources which we will need later on. So you can skip this if you want to since we have done in the previous videos also. So but if you want to, if you are viewing this in between, if you are viewing this, you can start with this. So what you can do is, now since we have cloned in our earlier session, so our next job is to say git fetch, and once you run this git fetch you have to wait, and then since I have already done this, so next thing that you required is you have to say git checkout t2 and then you have to say start. So once you hit enter, you will be able to see a server named folder will be available to you at your location. A server folder is available with 3 files in it: .babelrc, package.json and a server file inside it. Contains the most basic dependencies we need to get the server running, namely Express and Babel. So server.js contains the minimum hello world example of an Express server which we are going to build into a GraphQL server in the rest of this tutorial. So to get up and running, let's install the dependencies and start the server. So let's do it. On to the command prompt, you have to say cd and move on to the server file. So here you have to put the exact entire address. For example, if I try to specify the half path over here, it gives the error that's the path cannot be found. But then we can put the entire address into it and then move on to the server. Then our next job is to install. So you have to say npm install. Once you have been into a right folder, you have to say npm install and wait for the system to respond to it. Now once we are able to see the installation is being done, so the next part is to run it. So we also know the command. So it says npm start, and now we have to get back to the browser. So we will automatically be redirected to the browser, and where it has to display hello world. So if we say over here, it says starting Babel node server.js, but we have to wait for it to respond to it. So at the left top corner, if you see, we are able to see a hello world response. So this means if your browser shows at the localhost 4000, if shows hello world, this means with the server app is running, and we are ready to move ahead with the GraphQL part for the tutorial. So now we are supposed to write a schema. So when building an app from the scratch, you should think about the underlying data model. So whenever a step, always define a relational database schema. So now let's move ahead, and to write our schema, we have to explore the file that is schema.js. So let's get back to the file. So in a new location, let's now write the schema. So let's say now, let's give out the entry point. So say src, so which indicates source. and say schema.js. So we got to import, so we say import and say make executable schema, comma, add mock functions to schema, and then you have to close this, and then you have to say from, and then specify that it has to be done from GraphQL tools. And then we say a constant type definition equal to, and then say type channel. We have to specify ID, and exclamation specifies that it cannot be skipped, and the name is next that we require, and the type is string, and then close it. Now next we have to specify a type which is query. So this is query type, and requires channels, and in square brackets we have to say channel. Then we have to close with the curly brackets, and then use the semicolon to close it. Then we have to take a next constant as schema, which is equal to make executable schema, and then it says type definition, and we now have to finish this, saying we got to export it to schema, and then close it. Then we are exporting the schema now. So we might add certain more types in our messaging app in the future. So, but for now the channel type and entry point is all is required for now. So the last line takes a type definition string and turns it into an executable schema for our server to use. So now make executable schema is a function from GraphQL tools which we now need to install. So let's get back to the command prompt and do it. And now you got to say npm install save GraphQL tools and hit the enter and wait for your system to respond to it. But now you can see over here Graph tools have been installed, and now we need to wire up the schema to the server. So now that we have our schema, we need to wire it up for our Express server. So we will use GraphQL Server Express and GraphQL tools for that. But GraphQL Server Express also needs a body parser. So let's go ahead and install the body parser now. So the next command that we require is, it says npm install here we have to say GraphQL server and say express, and we need body parser, so we need to specify, and that's it. And now we need to run this too and wait for the server to respond and our command prompt to respond to this. If you are able to see, the installation has begun, and so that is also installed on the machine now. So what we will do is, now we will import the functions we are going to use at the top of the server.js. So let's get to the file server.js and edit it, and at top we have to say import GraphQL Express and we have to say GraphQL Express and now we have to import it from the tool that we have installed, that is Express, and then we have to close the terminate the statement. And also we had installed one more thing, that is body parser. So we'll say import body parser and then specify the location, and that has to be imported from body parser. And now we will also need to import the schema we just wrote in schema.js. So let's do it. So in server only we need to do it. So we say import, what is the schema that I supposed to import, and we say import schema, and from we'll specify the location over here. But it has to be inside the quotation. So you say src and then say schema and terminate the statement, and you got to save all this. So once you have saved this, and we have to do this because the type definitions only describe what type exists in our schema, and they do not tell the server how to execute the queries against it. So now make executable schema turns a type definition into the executable schema, to which we can add custom resolve functions later on. So resolve functions are core pieces of GraphQL that tell the server how to resolve each part of the query basically. So in order to make our server respond to GraphQL request, we need to tell Express to pass request to our GraphQL Express middleware, which execute the queries against the schema. Now we will do this by replacing the current server.get lines with the following. So if you see here, we have a server.get at the third last line. So we got to make some minor changes into it. So what we need is, we have to first get it removed, whatever it is pre-written. So what we have to do is, we also have to remove .get, rather we have to say server.use and write GraphQL, require a backslash, okay, and now close this, put a comma and say we'll remove this as well and say body parser dot JSON, then comma, and then say GraphQL Express and say schema. So this is what it is. There is extra semicolon over here. We do not need to maintain this. So let's close this. And to test whether your server is working, we need to open a URL. So let's get back to the browser. Now we have to put the address, say http localhost 4000 GraphQL, then question mark, and then query equal to, you have to say schema types name, and then close it. And once you run this, you will be able to see the schema. Now you'll be able to see the schema type, the data, the name, what qualities name have, and those sort of things you will be able to see once you get into the local host of it. And the query we just executed makes a use of a GraphQL's built-in introspection capability, basically. So introspection allows to query the server for information about itself. So what type exists, what fields do they have, how they are related to each other, what interfaces they implement, and sort of things. This lets you build some pretty powerful tools like the amazing interactive query editor called GraphQL, so which we are going to set up right now, and we also have seen earlier too. So let's start using the GraphQL for the purpose. Now let's set up GraphQL. So in the server.js, only server.use needs to be modified. So now we have to write GraphQL and GraphQL Express, and in that, where it was written as schema, we got to edit and put end point and URL, and just gotta say GraphQL and then save it. So once you now go on to the previous location and put underscore schema and hit play, so you will be able to see data, schema, and along with that types will keep coming on the right side of the output screen. But now it doesn't actually do anything. That's because we haven't hooked our GraphQL schema up to any data. So now let's go ahead and do that. So it's time to connect your GraphQL schema to the real data. So let's see how we can do that. We just have to edit the schema file before export, and after make executable schema, we are supposed to write only one statement that says add mock functions to where? To schema. That's right. And we have to say schema. And that is the only thing that we are supposed to do. If you run the same query again, you should now get some data with random IDs and also hello world. So now mocking can be very useful if you want to start building your front end before the back end is done. But since we want to learn how to build a RIA server, let's delete the add mock function to the line and write some resolve functions. So let's go ahead and create some another file. So first of all we delete it and let's go back, and now we have to create a resolver.js in a source file. So turn your notepad on and write source resolvers.js channels, and there we have to say id equal to the 1 and say name equal to the soccer, and then we are supposed to close it, but before that we got to give the comma and then one more comma, and then we need id 2 and say name, say baseball, and let's come on to the next point and fill this up. So now you got to say export resolvers equal to query and then say channels return channels and here we got to give out the comma, close it, and a comma to close it, and then last one, and then we'll terminate this and save with the name resolvers.js in a src folder. So let's save it. So as we can notice it here, resolvers have roughly the same shape as that of our schema, so that's no accident. Query is the type and channels is one of its field. For now our channels resolve functions take no argument and simply return the channels we have defined above. So later on we will see some more complex resolve function and return promises. To make a server use the resolve function that we just have created, we have to make changes in the schema.js. So let's go and make some changes. Here you have to say import and say resolvers, and then you have to say from, and we got to specify the location that says resolvers and then terminate it, and at the end we have to say in type def we have to say comma resolvers and then save it, and we have to be sure that we have removed add function to schema. Otherwise, resolve function would get applied. If not everything is working, we have to check the browser. So now you'll be able to see that a channel's ID and name has responded with ID1 as soccer and ID2 as a baseball. So you have a setup of server, a return GraphQL schema, generated mock data from it, and we have got bit familiar with GraphQL, and we also wrote our first resolver function, right? So this is not first resolver function, but then the aspect of React to GraphQL, this has been the first resolver function for us. Now let's move on to the third part, which is about mutations now. So let's look at that part and move ahead. Now in this part, we have to do 4 things, just to list out 4 things. So we have to connect our front end to the server, define the GraphQL mutation on the server, and then call the GraphQL mutation from the React component on the client, and then also we have to update the state on the client to make sure it's in sync with server. So all of them is very simple. So let's begin. Now put your location in a command prompt back to graph tutorial, and we have to say git fetch and wait for the computer to respond to it. I suggest you check T3 even though we have done it last time, because it may happen there may be some changes in app.css, so and also in app.js. So let's do it. So you can say git checkout t3 dash start and hit the enter. So now let's start the server just to see whether everything is fine or not. So you can say npm install and say npm start and wait for the system to respond to it. So installation has begun, so we need to wait, and you have to be sure that there is no error, and our GraphQL server is running on localhost 4000. So now let's start the next server. Let's run an app on localhost 3000. So what we can do is cd client and the same thing, npm install and say start, and now wait for the computer to respond to it. Now since both of them are working on the different ports, so we now require a special package, that is CORS package. So what we'll do is we will need to enable the CORS server. So we will see how to use the CORS package here. So let's coming on to the server directory. Now coming on to the server directory, be careful you do not do these things inside the client directory, and now you say install save CORS and hit the enter. Now the next step will be we will have to import CORS in server or server.js. So let's get into the server.js and make the changes. So we have to import this CORS. Now we have to say import CORS, and where do you intend to import it from? So it has to be import from a package. that we just now installed. So import course from course, and also along with that make changes in server.use, put strict, and we also have to change the code. So let's do it. So we need course, and in the bracket write origin and say HTTP, specify the, so you say local host, and we take it to 3000, close it, and on the front end we need to import create network interface from React Apollo, and then replace our mock network interface with one that connects to the server. So we have to get into the app.js and src folder. Now let's write a import statement here. So we got to import, it's a Apollo client, comma, Apollo provider, and say create network interface, comma, and then close it, and also specify from where would you like to import this. So you got to specify from, the location is React and it is Apollo, and then close this, save it, remove import mock network interface. This is one thing that we have to remove. In fact, every code that was used to import mock interface needs to be removed, and we are removing it. Now let's write the replacement of it. So now what we need to replace it with is constant network interface equal to create network interface, and then you have to write URI and say HTTP localhost GraphQL, and along with that also we need to write equal to new Apollo client, and then say network interface, and the client is now connected to the server on the port number 3000. So let's check it out. So now your page should look something like this. Now I may be able to see basketball also, and you might be only able to see soccer and baseball. That is because I have given more than two options here. So that's not the issue. You may be only able to see soccer and baseball here. So now it's time to define the mutations on the server. So let's get to the file server.js and do it. Now mutation will be defined on server source and the schema file that is inside the source of a server file. So now we got to say now up till our channels it is okay. After this we will write add channel, and in the bracket we have to say name. The name has got type string, and that says channel, and then we need to close this, and then we got to save this. So the new mutation type that we are trying to add defines a single mutation at channel which takes a single argument. The mutation returns a channel object which we can then select fields on as just with the query. So let us see later on. Now our resolve function basically lives in server source resolver.js. So now let's head over there and add resolve function for a new add channel. So the resolve function has to take a name provided as an argument and generate an ID for the new channel before adding it to the existing list. Let's make a change to the server source and resolver.js and add the next ID variable, define the resolver for mutation.addChannel. So let's get on to the file. Now let's say channels equal to, so, and then say let next ID equal to the 3, export constant resolvers equal to query channels, and then we have to say return channels, and we have to declare mutations also here. So we have to say mutation add channel root comma argument new channel equal to ID, and we have to say next ID. So we got to make it in an increment order and say name channels dot push, and we can say new channel, over here, and at the last we have to say that we need to return new channel, and we gotta close this, As you can see, the resolver just pushes a new channel to channels, increment the next ID, return the newly created channel. If you head over to GraphQL 4000 port, you should be able to run example that of the mutation and should be able to get some response. So let's move ahead and see the way we'll be able to put on the query. Now this will actually return three fields: soccer, baseball and basketball. So let's see. If you try to implement a query this way, you will be able to see a response that I showed you earlier. So soccer, baseball and basketball. So there will be only new inserted basketball channel shows up after reloading. Basically, we were getting it earlier also, but now it should give you basketball along with soccer, baseball and these things. So now let's see how to call the mutation from a React component. So let's see how to do that. So let's move on to the files. Now create a new file in a source folder. Under that you have to create a new folder named component, and under that we have to create a file that is add channel, and we have to say import React from, obviously this has to be from React, and then you have to say constant is the add channel equal to we have to say handle key up equal to and then it says if event dot key code is equal to 13, then something should happen in console.log. So what should happen? So console.log event.target.value then it should have and then we are supposed to close this. We need something in return, so let's specify what do we need in return. Input type equal to text, and then place holder is equal to new channel, and then say on key up, it should be able to handle key up, and then so now and then we have to say export default add channel. The add channel component that we are using is really very simple. So far it is just consisting of a text input element and a handle key a function that prints the input text to the console and clears the input field when the user hits the key code 13. Now let's import in it source component channel list with data.js and place it right before our list channels. So let's open or let's create a new file. Rather, we have to save this file with the name add channel.js. So first of all save. So say import add channel from channel list equal to data loading comma error comma channels now it says if loading, then you got to return something. So what we will return is if the data is loading, then you say return next is if error then it should return some error message that we have to specify. And then you have to say return class name equal to channel list add channel and then you have to say channels.map Now once you have written this, and we'll go back to the same host, that is 3000, you'll be able to see now again that soccer, baseball and basketball, 3 in the row. Now to make our component call a GraphQL mutation, we have to wire it up with the GraphQL higher order component from React Apollo. So for the mutations, the GraphQL HOC passes down a mutate prop, which we will call to execute the mutation. Mention at the top, import React from React and import GQL, GraphQL from React Apollo, and it should be in quotations, right? And then you have to say constant add channel equal to mutate equal to EVT so if EVT dot key code (13) you have to say EVT dot persist variables name EVT dot target we have to say, and we also need a value, so we got to specify the value. Then you have to take dot then, and in the bracket value to say input type, which is equal to text, place holder should be equal to obviously to a new channel, and then on key up, you have to say handle key up, and now one more constant, add channel mutation, name, ID, and one more name, and then close it, and then we have to give the semicolon to close it down. So moving ahead, we have to specify one more constant, and say constant add channel with mutation GraphQL add channel. Then here we got one more, export default add channel with mutation. So now if you save this and go on to the page, you will get a place to, when you'll go on to a page, some text will disappear after you hit the enter. This means the mutation is quite successful. And obviously if you try to reload the page, which is not actually a great user interaction. So now what we'll do is update the client state after the mutation. The reason that our channel list didn't automatically render is that Apollo has no way of knowing that the mutation we just called has anything to do with the channels query that render our list. Now we have to tell our addChannel.js Apollo client that we want to refresh the channels after our mutation completes, and so for that we have to get back to the addChannel.js and say import channels list query from channels list with data and we have to close it with a semicolon, and along with that we also have to write mutate variables name dot value refetch queries and then say channels list query and if you will go to the page and now you will be able to add a new channel to it, and this will only update the UI for the mutation. If the mutation was initiated by another client, you won't find out until you do a mutation of your own and refetch a list from servers. Most of the time that is not an issue, but for real-time app, Apollo has a nice trick up its sleeves, transparently propagate updates to all clients with almost no effort for the programmer. So this is called as polling queries. In order to turn it on, simply pass the poll interval option with your channel list query in a channel list with data. You have to say export default GraphQL channels list query options poll interval 5000 and then you have to say channels list. Now Apollo will return the query every 5 seconds and your UI will be updated with the list of channels. You can test this by opening a new browser window and adding a channel there. A new channel window should appear over there after a small delay. So this is all about connecting the React to the GraphQL. Now there are many different languages that support GraphQL. Now let us see a certain list of frameworks, server-side frameworks, client libraries and other useful stuff that is useful for implementing GraphQL on various frameworks. So let's look at server libraries first. So as we have seen in a first session also, earlier also, how we can use GraphQL with the JavaScript. So it is pretty simple. You have to say npm install GraphQL and then hit it. But before this, there should be Node version that should be installed on your machine. And now we are supposed to wait for the computer to respond to it. But by the time we will create a file which will be hello.js file and add some pieces of code into it and will run it as a node. in our command prompt. So let's do that. Now we have to say where, and in bracket we have to write GraphQL build schema and we have to specify we require something. So what we require is GraphQL and next is where schema, that is we are declaring as a variable, so we will have to write build schema. The S has to be capital as a normal catcher, so that we follow actually, and then you have to say type query and what is it? It's hello, which has got type string, and then at next line we will be closing this, but we also have to mention this symbol over here, and okay, now let's declare one more variable. It's root, and it says hello and it says hello world, and then we are supposed to close this and terminate the statement. Again we need to call GraphQL schema comma root dot then response I write console.log, so we have to get response to the console. Okay, that's it, and let's close it, and I got to save this and save it with the name hello.js, and then save it. And now we have to get back to the command prompt. Point your command prompt to the location where you have created hello.js file and say node hello.js. So now if you see a response have come, hello world. So this is the reference implementation of the GraphQL specification designed for running GraphQL in a Node.js environment. Now next you can also run this with the Express GraphQL. So the reference implementation of the GraphQL API server over an Express web server this is. So you can use the next procedure to run GraphQL in conjunction with the regular Express web server, or you can also make it a standalone GraphQL server. So now let's do that. So we got to now point to the original location first of all. Now you have to say npm install Express express GraphQL for GraphQL. So we have to install Express in a conjunction with Express GraphQL. So now we hit the enter, and by the time the installation is finished, again we have to write and generate the .js file that can be used and called inside the command prompt just to show the execution. So we'll take one more example like we did earlier too. So this time we will build a server.js file that will be called in a command prompt. So let's just do that. So to build server.js, we have to say where express equal to, and we require now something. So that something is express. So we say very known way and a very simple commands are required to build a server. So now to run it on HTTP, we require express GraphQL and then close this, and now we require schema. So we say build schema and say equal to require GraphQL and we will now specify schema. So how variable schema has to be. So this will be called by build schema that we are defining here, and in the bracket we have to say what type. This is to be a query, so this is a query, right? Okay. And now query will have hello, which will be of the type string. Obviously this is a character data, so it has to be fine, that is. And let's just close this, and we now have to specify a root for this. So say hello and it must say hello then you have to say varep equal to express its app.use, and in the bracket you have to say GraphQL comma GraphQL HTTP, sorry, P has to be capital, and then you have to say schema has to be taken from schema, so which we have defined earlier, right? And there has to be a root value that has to be taken from root that we have defined, and don't forget to put commas over here. Okay, now this has to be run under GraphQL as we know, so you have to say true, and we just gotta close this, and now this has to be reflected at the local host, right? So we say app.listen, so you have to specify a port number. I'm just keeping it to 4000. You can keep it to 3000 as well, so it's up to you. and say console.log. So there should be if it is running, then it should reflect this on a log so that I am able to understand whether it is running or not. So, and now we got to save this, so we have to give it a name, server.js. Now I already have a file with this name, so I got to replace this, and I will get back to the command prompt, run this as a node, and then we'll see what happens. It must be able to reply hello world. So let's see. We are on our command prompt, and we just got to say no, we need the location too. So let's bring it to the location where we have saved it, and type again node server.js. So it shows some error. So there was an unterminated literal that was being left. But now if we made the correction over there, and now we are able to see that once you run node server.js again, it says now browse to this particular location in your browser, and you will find that GraphQL rather is running on that port. So let's get back to the browser, copy this address and get back to the browser and see whether it is running or not. So now if you look at in the browser window, you will be able to see GraphQL is running successfully. We can write the queries on our left hand side, and our response usually is available on the right hand side. So this is the way we can, but the database is not yet connected. So this is just the way we are able to see how GraphQL can work in various environments. In this interface, we can raise a query too. So for example, if you see here, we need a curly bracket, press Control space as we know, hello, and press Control Enter, or you can click a play button at the top, and you will be able to see data is being returned as a hello world. So this was about using GraphQL with Express, and now next part is creating a GraphQL server. So let's see how to do that. Now we are available with a set of GraphQL server packages from Apollo that work with various Node.js HTTP frameworks such as Express, Connect, Happy, KOA. So all those things. So first of all, let's try to run a hello world server with the GraphQL server Express. So for that we need again something to be installed. So we require GraphQL and we require server, and server has to be of Express. Then we need a body parser. Okay, and then it says Express GraphQL tools. Fine. Now hit enter, and by the time it begins with the installation procedure, this time also we have to make some changes in our server.js file. So let's make those changes by the time this installation is finished. So coming back to the earlier created server.js file, so we will make changes to the existing file. So express is what we need, so we keep that variable express, and we also keep where require express. So but here we also require a body parser that we will specify body parser here, and what is required is that we will specify. So we require over here is body, okay, so body parser, that is what is required. So let's close it, and we require a variable GraphQL express, comma GraphQL express, because we got to run it over there. And for this we need, so what will be required is we have to fill it here. So it says GraphQL server is one thing, and that has to be along with express. So this is for the time being, that is what is required, okay. And here we want executable schema, so remove this, and now say make executable schema, and say require GraphQL tools. Fine, that is, and there is an unbalanced quotation, we got to close this, terminate the statement. Now we got a one more variable, so it's type def, so it's a type definition that we are going to specify here. We also will require a body parser, like we did it while we were creating a server in our last session. So it specifies type query, and it's hello string, and next we require schema. So remove this for the time being. Schema has to be in a format, so we have to specify. So it is a query that will be raised, and which has to be the form that we have declared earlier in a query statement. So we got to close this over here, and then put a semicolon. Where root is not required here, but we require resolvers, so that it help understand GraphQL how it has to respond to each and every query that comes or that is raised. So query has to be respond in which way, that resolvers specify. So that is what is the a known feature of GraphQL. And you have to say what has to be returned. So it has to be world that has to be returned. For example, I'm just saying. And then you require one more, and you require one more closure here. Okay, so now we got to specify schema here. So it says where schema is equal to, and now it is make executable schema an executable schema should have type defs, and then comma, it should also have resolver. Both are declared, just we have to specify them. And then there is a where app, obviously that has to be in conjunction with express, so we are specifying that. And there is app.use where you will specify what will run. So it will be GraphQL that will be running on ports. It has got body parser dot JSON and GraphQL Express schema, and then again you have to say app.use this time GraphQL, and it has in conjunction with GraphQL Express and point URL GraphQL and then you have to say app.listen. Obviously that has to be reflected on a particular port, so we are keeping it to 4000. If you wish, you can keep it to 3000. And then something has to be reflected on a log, so we'll write that. So it has to be console.log, and in a log it should say now browse to local host. If you want, you can put the address, just because it will be easy to copy, that's the only reason. And otherwise it has to be on this particular port. So once we close this and now remove the lower part of it, we made the modifications and time to save this, and we have to get back to control panel where we will run it as a node and then see what happens. So now again to the particular location where I have saved my server.js, I have to type node server.js, so it shows now browse to this particular location and see. So let's get to the location. Now here it supports HTTP server framework such as Express, Connect, Happy and KOA. So now next is collaborating GraphQL with Ruby. So there is one extension to it that will be required. Let's do that. Now a GraphQL can also collaborate with Ruby. So we have a Ruby library for building GraphQL APIs. So let's do it. So now how can we proceed? So first of all, come to the default location where you want to install it. The command that you have to use is gem install GraphQL and hit enter and wait for the system to install it. And by the time we have to, like we were building a server file for JavaScript and Java Express. Now over here we have to build another file, hello file, but that has to run with in collaboration to Ruby. So let's build the file in the notepad and try to write a code and see whether it collaborates with Ruby and responds to us. So let's do that. So let's write a code which says require GraphQL query type is equal to of GraphQL fashion. So we got to specify that, and it is object type, and it has to be defined do name query. So to understand this, you should be bit versed with how Ruby works, but not necessary. You can type this code and check and put it to the actual project use. That's not the problem. And say types.string and then say resolve. So it has got object, comma, it will have arguments, and now close this and say hello world, and this requires to be end, fine. And now we have to declare schema as we do as usual. So it says schema is equal to, now how it should be, that is, and schema dot define do query. It has to be taken from query type, put it an end to it, and we have to be very cautious while you are writing these things. There should not be any syntax error. Schema dot execute, and what we need to execute is hello. Let's specify that. Save a file created in the notepad with the hello.rb extension and the pointer command prompt to the location where you have stored hello.rb file, and type ruby hello.rb and try to execute this. So you know now computer has responded data hello, and that is hello world. So this shows that GraphQL can work with Ruby also. Now it also works with Python. So let's see how can I make it work with the Python. So more or less we'll do hello world only, but certain things will change. Let's look at the installation process first. That is, we are going to do in command prompt. So what all commands are required? So first of all, try to install Python on our machines and then try to run it. Now a Python library for building GraphQL API, we will require Graphene. So first of all, let's say pip install Graphene. Now it says pip is not the recognized as an internal or operable command or batch file. So for this to do, we may require first to install Python and then run this command. You just have to say Python hello.py and it will return the value. So as you type a code Python hello pi, the Python will immediately respond with hello world in response. So as you can see over here, we have got hello world as a response. So this is all about connecting GraphQL to Python and Ruby and external interfaces.